In the glamorous world of rock music and Hollywood television, Richie Sambora and Heather Locklear seemed like the perfect match. To the public, they were the ultimate power couple, a blend of rock star charisma and Hollywood elegance. They walked red carpets hand in hand, smiled for flashing cameras, and seemed to live a life most could only dream about. Yet behind those perfect photographs, the reality was far more fragile. Their love story began like something out of a movie. Introductions made by a mutual friend, whirlwind romance, and a wedding in both New Jersey and Paris. For years they appeared united against the pressures of fame. But in February 2006, everything changed. Without warning, news broke that Heather had filed for divorce after 11 years of marriage. The shock was not just felt by fans, but by Richie himself, who said he had no idea this was coming. "It's completely untrue," he told ABC News shortly after the headlines hit, denying that any big fight had taken place. For him, life had seemed normal. They had just celebrated their anniversary and planned Valentine's Day together. But that illusion was shattered in a single moment. Her publicist's brief statement confirmed it after more than a decade together. Heather was ending their marriage. For Richie, this was not just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of a life he thought was secure. When Richie learned about the divorce, it wasn't through a private conversation with Heather. Instead, it was through the media, the same way strangers around the world found out. The day started like any other. After returning from a demanding tour, he expected rest, family time, and normalcy. Instead, he was greeted with a deafening kind of silence. No calls, no explanations, just the cold shock of headlines. He later recalled that there had been no arguments, no warnings, no signs of a marriage about to end. Just weeks before, they had been celebrating milestones together. Even when faced with rumors, the couple had stood united in public, saying, "The real story is that there is no story." Yet in truth, the slow unraveling had already begun, hidden under the surface. In a rare moment of openness years later, Richie told a close friend, "She took everything." He didn't mean just possessions or money. He meant the emotional foundation he had relied on. Heather had been his anchor through the chaos of life on the road, the one constant in his whirlwind lifestyle. Now she was gone, and with her went the stability he had counted on. It was a loss that went beyond the legal end of a marriage. It was a deep emotional wound, one that would take years to process. The beginning of Richie and Heather's relationship could have been a romantic film. Introduced by makeup artist Lisa Christie, they hit it off almost instantly. Heather, already a household name from shows like Melrose Place and Dynasty, was one of the most admired women in Hollywood. Richie, as lead guitarist for Bon Jovi, was one of rock's most recognizable figures. 7 months after they met, Richie proposed, and Heather said yes. They had a small courthouse wedding in New Jersey, followed by a romantic ceremony in Paris, a city that seemed to match their love's intensity. After the wedding, they settled into Heather's sunny Los Angeles home, a 4-bedroom haven where they began their life together. In 1997, their daughter Ava Elizabeth was born, and Richie later said, "There was never a moment I didn't love her." At first, their life was full of joy, family moments, shared dreams, and a deep bond that seemed unshakable. But Hollywood love stories often face pressures that ordinary couples don't, and those pressures would slowly start to pull them apart. The couple's careers were both demanding, and each pulled them in different directions. Richie's life revolved around touring, late nights, and the intense pace of the music industry. Heather was constantly filming, attending events, and meeting the expectations of being one of television's most beloved stars. Time together became rare. Their conversations turned into scheduling discussions rather than heartfelt talks. The home they had once filled with love became crowded with assistants, stylists, and the constant buzz of Hollywood life. The intimacy they shared began to fade, not in dramatic arguments, but in the quiet, steady drift of two lives moving on separate tracks. Richie never stopped loving Heather, and he made that clear in interviews, even after the split. "She's the mother of my child," he once said softly. What can you say? That statement reflected a truth, that despite the divorce, there was still respect and care between them. But love alone wasn't enough to keep their marriage together in the face of such demanding and often conflicting lifestyles. While rumors swirled in the tabloids, Richie insisted he was never unfaithful in the way the gossip suggested, but he admitted that he was absent in other ways. The constant travel, long tours, and pressures of fame meant he was often physically away and emotionally drained when he was home. Heather, for her part, had her own pressures. The glare of the spotlight, public expectations, and the unrelenting pace of her career. Weeks would pass with only phone calls to bridge the gap, and over time, those calls weren't enough. Their daughter Ava, still young, was caught in the middle, a reminder of what they had built together and what they were in danger of losing. When Heather filed for divorce, she cited irreconcilable differences, a legal phrase that hides the deep and complex struggles of a marriage breaking down. Looking back, Richie would say, loving her was never the problem, it was everything else. The demands of fame, the strain of distance, and the lack of time together had taken their toll. Through all the heartbreak, there was one constant that kept Richie grounded: his daughter Ava. Born into a world of flashing cameras, Ava was the most important part of his life. Richie had grown up without a strong example of fatherhood, but when Ava was born, something changed in him. The man who had lived for music and the road found new meaning in bedtime stories, school events, and simply being there for his child. "I would die for her," he said, and he meant it. When Heather sought full physical custody during the divorce, Richie didn't fight in the tabloids or wage public battles. Instead, he quietly sought joint legal custody so he could remain a steady presence in Ava's life. After the divorce, he bought a home just minutes from Heather's so he could be close for school drop-offs, weekends, and daily parenting. For him, fatherhood wasn't just a role, it was a lifeline. It gave him stability and purpose when everything else felt uncertain. Just weeks after the divorce filing, Richie found himself in the middle of another media storm, this time involving actress Denise Richards, who had once been friends with Heather. Tabloids turned it into a scandalous love triangle, with headlines painting a picture of betrayal and drama. The public fascination with the story was intense, and the press framed it as a shocking twist to an already high-profile breakup. For Richie, it was another layer of chaos in an already painful time. While some believed the rumors, others saw it as yet another example of how the media twists celebrity relationships into entertainment. Regardless of the truth, the scandal added tension and made healing from the divorce even harder. What had started as a deeply personal heartbreak was now a public spectacle, dissected by strangers and discussed on talk shows. Richie stayed relatively quiet through it all, choosing not to fan the flames with public arguments. In the years since, Richie has remained private about many details of the split, but when he does speak about Heather, it's with kindness and respect. He has focused on music, fatherhood, and his own personal growth. At 66, looking back, he can see both the beauty and the pain of that chapter in his life. Heather was once his anchor, and losing her was devastating. But he also found strength in fatherhood and learned the value of being present for the people who matter most. Their love story was filled with highs and lows, public glamour and private struggles, and while it didn't last forever, it left an impact that shaped who Richie is today. In the end, his story is not just about loss. It's about resilience, love for a child, and finding a way forward when the world seems to fall apart. When the Denise Richards story broke, it was like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already burning. Tabloids plastered their faces across front pages, turning whispers into headlines. The narrative was irresistible to gossip magazines. Denise, the beautiful actress and former friend of Heather, the heartbroken ex-wife, and Richie, the rock star caught in the middle. To the public, it looked like a betrayal of friendship and love all rolled into one. The reality, as always, was far more complicated. Richie has never gone into deep detail about how or why his relationship with Denise began, and whether it overlapped with the end of his marriage. Denise herself would later speak publicly, insisting that she and Richie connected after both were going through heartbreak, and that it wasn't the betrayal the media painted it to be. But the damage was done. For months, Richie couldn't open a magazine or turn on the television without seeing his personal life dissected like a soap opera plot. Some fans supported him, believing the media had twisted the truth. Others turned away, disappointed by the scandal. What hurt most wasn't the public judgment. It was that his personal struggles were now being used as entertainment. The constant attention made moving on from the divorce even harder, and every step forward seemed to be shadowed by the glare of a camera flash. Despite the noise surrounding them, Richie and Heather seemed to share an unspoken understanding: protect their daughter from the chaos. While they were no longer together, both made sure to avoid speaking badly about each other in public. Richie's respect for Heather as the mother of his child never wavered. Likewise, Heather rarely discussed Richie in interviews, focusing instead on her own career and their daughter's well-being. That mutual respect became the quiet foundation for a co-parenting relationship that worked, not perfectly, but enough to give Ava stability. For Richie, that meant showing up for her even when it was uncomfortable to be in the same room as his ex-wife at public events. School plays, graduations, red carpet appearances, he was there because Ava was there. Over time, the bitterness softened. Life moved forward, even if the scars of the past didn't completely fade. As the years went by, Richie stepped back from the intense spotlight that had defined his career for decades. He left Bon Jovi in 2013, citing personal reasons, but it was clear that his priorities had shifted. Music was still a part of his life, but not at the expense of family. He began writing, producing, and performing on his own terms, choosing projects that allowed him to be present for Ava. At the same time, he worked through his own personal struggles, including addressing stress and health challenges that had been ignored during the height of his fame. Interviews in later years revealed a calmer, more grounded man, someone who had been through the fire and come out the other side with a clearer understanding of what truly matters. He still spoke of Heather with respect, acknowledging the good times and the ways they had grown apart. There was no bitterness in his words, only acceptance. Today, Heather Locklear lives a quieter life away from the intense pace of her earlier career. She continues to act occasionally, but focuses much of her time on her family and personal life. Ava, now an adult, has followed her own path, occasionally appearing at public events with either parent, but maintaining her own identity outside of their fame. Richie, at 66, still plays music and occasionally tours, but his life is no longer consumed by the constant chase for fame. His social media often shows moments with Ava, musical collaborations and reflections on the past. For fans, seeing him in this stage of life is both comforting and inspiring, proof that even after heartbreak, there's a way to rebuild. Looking back, Richie Sambora's marriage to Heather Locklear is remembered not just for its glamour, but for the very human story beneath it. They were two people in love, navigating the pressures of fame, long-distance careers, and personal challenges. In the end, love alone wasn't enough to hold them together, but it remained enough for Richie to speak about her with warmth years later. "She's the mother of my child, man. What can you say?" That simple sentence says more than 1,000 headlines ever could. It's a reminder that relationships are rarely as simple as the media portrays them. They are layered with history, shared memories, and a bond that doesn't vanish overnight. Richie's journey after the divorce, through scandal, personal change, and a renewed focus on fatherhood, shows that even when life takes away something precious, it can also give back in unexpected ways. His love for Ava became his anchor, and from that anchor, he rebuilt a life that is quieter but richer in the things that matter most. And for the fans who once saw him as just a rock star, his story is a powerful reminder Behind every headline is a human heart learning to heal.